are having a wonderful time despite some of the restriction. Webo, it's indeed a pleasure for me to be here again tonight, and certainly want to thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, Edric W. Stanley, good evening.
Good evening, Webo. Good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to the people of St. Kitts and more especially the people of Nevis. And to those who listen to us on the World Wide Web, YouTube and Facebook, we of course welcome you every Tuesday evening to listen to Vaughan Radio based on what we have to disseminate from here, whether we are on as the heavyweights or other guests. But we do disseminate good information regarding Nevis and St. Kitts, and indeed, by extension, the world. So good evening, Webo.
We got not a very long time here this evening, but I got something I'd just like to mention before we get into what anybody else would like to get into, to see whether or not we can get it. I've attempted to discuss this particular area many a times over the past few decades. Sometimes we get it done a couple of times, but it's becoming increasingly evident. I don't know if it is the pandemic that is bringing out the frustration in people, but I've always encouraged people to try to be as calm and as strategic about doing things as possible. So I had an incident this morning when I, finished my shift at 8 o'clock. It normally happens, but, as I said, I'll bring it here to see whether or not we can get some results, because I hate when something can be solved. It is not. So I got a call, said about 10 past 8. A gentleman, he suggested he was living, I might have been in the Gingerland area. And he told me that there was a pipe in the area that was running all night, damaged pipe. And up to now, the water department people haven't come as yet. So I said, well, did you call them? He said, well, I kept calling all the time and nobody wouldn't answer the phone. I said, well, why don't you call 469-5521 and ask them to put you on to the water department. And then you tell them. He said, okay. So that was about another 10 minutes elapsed, and he called me this time with frustration in his voice, and he said, boss man, I can't get nobody still, And I said, but sir, I can't do anything about it. Now, just to be clear, I don't have a problem over the past decades. People always call, and we'll try to help where we can. But I always tell people, understand it clear and know who's responsible for what. Right? Again, I'm not saying that people shouldn't call and ask, because we always try to help. Right? About a week ago or so, after the borders opened up, somebody called and asked for me. And they said, I don't know where else to turn, because I know you try to help people. I said, what's the problem? Some issue about sending email to where they're supposed to send it, and nobody wouldn't answer. They don't pay for their tests, etc., etc. I called one of the officials who I know was involved, because I had their number. Up to now, they ain't called me back up to yet. However, I tried again. I called another person. That person answered. Kept them on the line, so they asked the persons, they think the persons were living in Anguilla, and they were able to get things sorted out. And what I find was significant about it, it was a husband and wife. And when it was finished and they said thanks, they didn't hang up the phone. The husband hadn't hung up the phone as yet. And the wife let out a scream, and he said, Lord, thank you at last. Right? And I know how that feeling is. Now, so all I'm asking people to do, on one hand, the people who are responsible for things. Please help. I know this fellow, I mentioned the story already, and one of these days I'll mention the name because I got some hard evidence myself, because I don't say things that I don't know nothing about. He went to a particular person in high office and actually cried tears to get in a particular position. And in that department, I hear everybody in the street complaining about him. And I tested it out myself, and it's true. But the problem is that high official, he serves that high official well. So he will be always there. Now, to the matter at hand, Mr. Brand. Are you responsible for water, right?
Yes, Webo,
Okay.
I am.
Could you kindly tell that gentleman and the listening public what they should do should they have a problem, as I explained, and others? Give them a number that you know people will answer.
Well, Webo, the first thing I want to say is let me apologize to the gentleman for calling, as he would have indicated a number of times, and not being able to reach anyone or get any assistance. That is unfortunate, and that is definitely not the kind of interaction that we want with the general public. One of the things, Webo, we have noticed is that we have a number of telephones that persons can call, and at times the general public would call those numbers, and unfortunately the person on the other end is not as responsive as we would like. It is an issue. It is something that we are trying to deal with internally, and as I would have indicated some weeks ago, we would have make some necessary changes within the department. And one of our biggest mandate going forward would certainly to try and be as more interactive to the general public, more responsive to the general public. I can give the gentleman my telephone number, 662-8130. He can probably call me after the show, and then I would certainly direct the persons to deal with that matter. It is unfortunate that they have to come to this. The water department have a number of telephone numbers, number of persons who are on call. 668-2425, 660-5976, and also the operations manager 664-5006. Of course, one of the other issues that we have, Webo, the government 5521 does not function after hours.
But just let me cut in here.
Yeah.
Does it function at 10 minutes past 8 in the morning?
Well, it should function at 1 minute before 8.
Well, that's the time that I told him to call 5521.
Yes.
I deliberately said call 5521 at that time because I know the offices should open at 8.
Yes, the office should open at 8 o'clock.
Yes. No, go ahead, but I just wanted to point that out.
Yes, like I said, Webo, it is an issue that we have faced over time. Sometimes the general public would call these numbers and they don't get the kind of response that they need. I have developed a policy, Webo, that 99% of the time, once my phone rings, I try to answer it, because you don't necessarily know what the person on the other end of the line, what the issue is. And I think that we would know exactly what the issues are unless we answer our phone. So, like I said, I would like to apologize to that gentleman, and I've given him 3 numbers along with mine, 662-8130. You can call me, and we'll try and remedy that matter as soon as possible.
But keep in mind, Mr. Honorable Spencer Brand, I only use that as an example,
Yes.
because you know that I have other issues that are long for months and months and months in the same category.
Yes.
Right? And you know me well in a long time that when you see me bring something to the fore, it is at great expense, because as a consequence of this, I will get spite. Right? They will, and stuff like that, and then nobody will. But you see, sometimes you have to stand up on principle, right? And somebody's got to pay the sacrifice. And then when as I mentioned the example with the fellow, he and the boss are tight, so he can do just about anything, and he remains there. So I wouldn't even complain in those instances. So I want people to know that I brought this here to you. I didn't give you any advance thing, let them know that. And I will bear the consequences. But I hope it gets some results somehow. Dr. Bartlett, you wanted to say something?
Well, I didn't put my hand up, but I would imagine that any reasonable person or a citizen would want to at least weigh in on this issue. And what I find is, I don't think this is an issue that is necessarily unique to the water department. I just find that the level of service generally, as it relates to government, services, just not at the level that they ought to be. Just a few days ago, I was sharing an experience with someone about a bed that someone was taking a bed, and it fell off the truck. Well, I would want to think that it just fell off the truck. And that bed was lying at the side of the road, close to occasions on Pinnis Bypass Road. And it was lying there for days, if not a week, but I didn't time it, but it was there for a considerable length of time. And I asked the person, nobody in charge of me this? Because I can't imagine that we have all these functionaries or people who are in responsible position, people who would pass there because you have to pass it to go Social Security building where a lot of government ministers, operate from. And plus, it is a thoroughfare. It's an area that people pass, often. And I'm like, somebody must have seen that, and you're telling me that you're in charge and you're in high office, and even if it's not within your purview necessarily, that is an issue that ought to be brought up to whomever is in charge of that particular department. And I just find that a lot of things are just being left to it's more like a laissez-faire type of attitude towards government service. And I don't know for how long this can continue, but we find ourselves repeating the same things over and over and over again. And it means that there's a breakdown. And if people are not going to find out where the breakdown is, because obviously well, let me not say obviously, because everything is not obvious to everybody. But I think it ought to be investigated as to how best we can serve the general public without people getting frustrated. And just last week, someone was telling me about an experience they had. The water was running overnight as well. And it just kept running. They made calls and there wasn't any speedy response so as they were concerned. And I jokingly said to the person, well, you know what? I think because it is raining now and we don't have a high demand for water. Well, not necessarily we don't have a high demand, but we can meet the demand. It is not drought season. They probably just left it there because it's not impacting, heavily at this point in time. But we can't let our resources be wasted like that. And I don't know what the problem is, but I think for Mr. Brand to give out his personal number is quite unfortunate that he has to go to that level. If you're in charge, give nobody your telephone number because they don't need to come to your level to fix no pipe. You don't fix pipe. And you ought not to be directing anybody to fix the pipe. Somebody's in charge. And if people can't be in charge, then find people who could operate at that level. But what I find is that, like you said, a lot of favor kind of thing and people close to the minister and, those kind of things can't continue. If we say that if we want to be a progressive society, we're going to have to take responsibility when we have the authority.
Full disclosure as well, this does not just happen in the government service. It happens across the board. But again, I wasn't singling out and targeting Mr. Brand or the water department as well, right? And notice when I said it happened, I intended not to even bring up the issue here, but to make the point on the early morning program, because my thing is just to encourage people, if you're in a position to serve, do the best that you can do, right? And don't use the position to keep spiting people, because people like me, you're not going to get me down so easy, because I'll keep coming back, right? But it grieves my heart when some people who are, as I described, too weak to fight, and you just keep taking advantage of them. That is not good as a people. Now, Dr. Bartlett, let me make this commitment, which I made decades ago, in reference to where I have authority over. Anybody who feels that they don't get good service from us, they can find me. And the commitment is that they'll be satisfied. And that's not no ifs, no buts, no maybe about it. I said it once, I said it 100 times, and I challenge and I encourage everybody else to make the same commitment that we make. Edric, you have a lot to say.
Well, all I could say, and I don't have a lot to say, but people are people, and it is unfortunate that when we are placed in a position to take responsibility, we are given the authority, but we do not want to accept the responsibility of that authority. And in that regard, we tend to fashion things based on how we want it to be done, until we've got a complaint, or complaint after complaint after complaint, and sometimes corrective actions are not taken with reference to the problem or the person who is part of the problem. But we must categorize it as being cultural, Webo. And simply because it is cultural, we sometimes put a label on it, even to say it's because we are of the same race, so to speak, and you can't do a thing about it. Although, if we attempt to agitate, modify, and do all the forceful things, we will get results. But you look down the line, it is repetitive, simply because of who we are.
Well, I actually agree with you, Mr. Stanley, but here's the problem. Here's my point. Some time ago, a few weeks ago, maybe months by now, we used to be able to go down and up the road by Miss Dyer. Remember that?
Quite so.
Then we changed it, and we all agreed and accepted we can come up no longer. So, when somebody does not go up any longer, that's cool. But when you now come up, then you have a problem. So in other words, if we are going to, it's cultural, and it's the way we are, and we accept it, then nobody will complain. That's fair?
That's on the other hand. Well,
No, but that's what I'm saying. Now I can live with people, having a position, and when you call them, they don't answer and stuff. I can live with that if that is what we all agree to. But when you get the position and you offer a particular service, and a person has a particular expectation, it should be fulfilled. No?
it should be. It should be. But invariably, you would find that people attempt to go their way, do what they feel, and it becomes a norm, unfortunately.
So my point is, let us all agree it's the norm, and then we wouldn't get any complaints, right?
You must get complaint if it is not satisfactory. Well, you must get complaint because we are human beings. We expect certain standards, and based on that expectation, we are...
Have you heard anybody complaining since we all have agreed that you don't come up the road by Miss Dyer now?
Well, I haven't heard anybody complaining.
Why? Why you think nobody's complaining?
See, I'm not where the buck stops.
Could it be because we have all accepted it?
I would imagine so.
But that's what I'm saying. So if we agree that when your pipe, for instance, water is running and so on and so forth, you'll just leave it there until when somebody decides to fix it, then nobody will bother about it, correct?
Well, I think you got to categorize things differently. That is one issue by itself. And it may
Okay,
not-
use another example then.
No, the water issue is something that is quite poignant.
So then
and
why you going off it?
I'm not going off it more than
You
to
said
say
that's-
that certain things become normal, even though it's abnormal, because of the way it is, and nobody complains about it. It remains abnormal, and the abnormality becomes normal.
But that's that's the point. So all I'm saying is,
But then in every instance,
if it becomes normal, all I'm saying is, let us accept it as normal and don't call me to curse. You see, that's all my point is. And again, people always call, we welcome people, we like to serve. What I'm saying is, my frustration is when people are frustrated, right, and they're not properly taken care of. That's where my frustration is.
well,
So I'm making the appeal to people who are serving, please help.
the water issue is a real issue, and I would say, whenever
It's
I
not
see
just
water,
the water issue, Mr. Stanley.
no, whenever
That
I
is
see a pipe
only.
running, I always try to call or say, look, please fix that. Whether or not it's raining, I go right there.
I bet if you were working at the water department, you wouldn't have seen the pipe them running.
That's not true, Webo. Let me tell you something. You see, you took over this radio station, and quite a number of people would have taken it over, and it would not have been running up to today. There are certain people you give assignments to, and you don't have to worry about them simply because they're disciplined. That's the word. Disciplined. And because of that discipline, they will be given the authority, and they accept that responsibility with buoyancy, and they will take it and run with it.
Okay, we're going to get off that maybe into something else, but this is a light moment. I'm dealing. The reason why I bring these examples is to let people know that the heights that great men reach and kept. You know that story by now.
Sure.
Were not attained by sudden flight. So I want people to know the frustrations that we get as well. I'm dealing with an issue right now in a particular area. And they told me that normally will take about a week. This thing been going on now for 20 weeks and counting. And I'm still at it. So I just want people to know that notwithstanding you might see somebody seem as if they do me the same thing, but I don't give up. They bluff, they laugh, and stuff like that. But I keep pressing on. That's why I told the gentleman in the example that we're using, I said, okay, why don't you call this number then? In other words, don't give up. Try again. But our people who are in the responsible positions and those who are at the top, the very top, must listen to the other people as well. If they got frustration and you got people there who is thinking, then as Edric said, you got the authority, then do something. You must not take advantage of people like that. I've been taken advantage of all my life, and I'm still fighting. But I don't want other people to go through the same thing. Off to a next.
Okay,
yes,
go ahead.
Dr. Bartlett.
I think, this might be a good time to segue.
Yes.
Well, before we segue, and if Dr. Bartley don't mind me, before she go into something else, I believe, Weber, that the general public have a general expectation that when they call, it doesn't necessarily have to be government to get some service, but generally, I think that as individuals, as humans, when we make certain requests, we certainly have certain expectations. And I feel that when those expectations aren't met, then spoke about the level of frustration, that those frustration can continue to build up. And I often feel, Weber, that from where I sit sometimes, that a lot of these issues in my mind are what I would call small issues, small matters. And for some time it just baffled me as to why some of these issues rise to the level of frustration that they do at times. And we keep insisting, we keep requesting, we keep asking that certain things are being done in a particular way. And general public at times still feels shortchanged because things aren't done in a particular way. And it's unfortunate because I believe that not only government, business generally are here to serve the general public. We put ourselves in certain position and we offer a certain level of service with the idea of serving the general public. And when we do not rise to that level of service, it creates that sense of disappointment and frustration to the general public. And I want to make this appeal, Webo, that you have made it, and I know you have made it time and time again. Stanley, Dr. Bartlett, I believe all of us continue to make it, that we must always seek to try and be as respectful, cordial, and responsive to the general public. Because, Webo, we don't necessarily know what it is on the other end that individuals are requesting. And if we are good enough, pleasant enough, responsive enough to just listen, then I believe that we would have a much better served general public, Webo.
Well, I was really hoping that we'll just, take the hint and move on. But since you want to keep it alive, I must say, because I'm a taxpayer as well, and I'm a citizen of this country, we are not getting what we deserve. We are not getting what we were promised, because if we keep hearing about good governance, all this is a part of good governance. You have to be able to control the people who fall within your purview. And what I find too often, sometimes politicians, they do get involved in sometimes appointing and disappointing where they ought not to be involved. But then they stand back when the general public start to complain. I'm not saying that is true of you, Mr. Brand, but at the end of the day, because I remember hearing, talk about transforming the civil service and doing all sorts of things. And I remember making the point that the civil service used to operate at a certain level, and I don't know if whether your memory serves you well enough so that you can even reference some of the things that never used to happen, at least not at this frequency anyway. But there was discipline, and Stanley used the word earlier. And there used to be discipline in the service, but there is no longer anything named so in the service, it seems. I've noticed it firsthand, people are supposed to be in charge, but what they're doing is they're at a certain level of, remuneration. They're getting paid at a certain level, but they're not necessarily demonstrating that they have the capacity to be able to manage the people over whom they have supervisory capacity. And it's about time that people start calling it for what it is. The civil service as it is now seem not to have that level of discipline. And I'm not blaming anybody in particular, I'm not pointing any fingers, but what we need really at this point in time is accountability. And we need to be able to look at the systems that are working and be able to critique them and be able to level the not mitigation, but the remedial action that is necessary to get people up to speed. We shouldn't be hearing still that people are calling this department and that department and calling around and can't get service. That is ridiculous in 2020. And I think it's about time that the transformative actions that were promised be delivered on.
Dr. Bartlett, I don't know if I want to use such a broad brush against the civil service. I believe that we have some real outstanding civil servants that continue to do their jobs on a day-to-day basis. They continue to go beyond the call of duty. I think what is sad and unfortunate that we do have a few that are not performing at the level that they should. And I believe whenever there is a breakdown in the system, wherever it is, it kind of reflect across the entire system. And I would want to encourage the civil servant and the civil service that they do have a very important role to play. They do have a critical role to play in the development of our country. I feel that oftentimes that they go unrecognized. They are not given the credit and the props, so to speak, that is rightly due to them. But I would believe, Dr. Bartlett, that there is still some vibrancy within some sectors of the civil service. Yes, they are just in every organization there would be one or two bad apples here and there, and I wouldn't want to, with a broad brush, want to so quick to vilify the entire civil service. I believe that they continue to do, in most instances, what they are asked to do, and at times, there are a breakdown in the system here and there. But I still think that, of course, is there room for improvement? Absolutely. Is there room for greater accountability? Absolutely. Is there room for greater performance? Absolutely. Just in every organization and in every system, I believe that there is always room for improvement. There is always room for individuals and departments and organizations to grow and improve and expand. So,
well, if I just might, I really don't want to prolong this, and I don't want anyone under the sound of my voice to think that I am bashing the civil service. That's not what this is about. So, Mr. Van, if you got that impression, please let me restate.
okay.
I have no issues generally with the people. I'm saying that when we have issues related to non-performance, and I know that I would have heard no less a person than the Premier who would have said that the people now don't want to go into the civil service because they think that, well, it used to be a time that, people wanted to go. Anyway, I don't want to misquote him. But suffice it to say, he was really making a point that the productivity level and the attitude that pervaded at that point in time when he was making the critique, that people really ought to be doing better. And I thought that he was making an effort generally to make sure that people start, improving. I don't want to use, that people start improving on the thing. But the problem I have is that the civil service used to be a service that people used to look up to. It used to be an organization that people used to look up to. You couldn't get promoted in the civil service, or you couldn't get, established as a civil servant unless you had English and all that kind of thing. Nowadays, you hear people with some kind of, English that grammar, when they start talking, you want to run under the table. I mean, the kind of breakdown in the system, I say, has been orchestrated by the politician and interference of the politician. And the thing is that it's about time that the politicians step back and let the civil service start operating the way it used to. We've brought a lot of people into the system who were not necessarily fit to be in the system. And this is not, like I said, bashing the people who are in the system. I'm saying the system used to work fine because there were rules and regulations related to the way people operated. And those things have not been, within recent times, I don't think have been observed.
The dynamics with reference to government, but extended to the private sector, are completely different now because of a lot of reasons. Some people have become more competent, some people have become more affluent, and as a result, they have certain attitudes, and as time passes, the people who are in authority to take punitive measures on the non-performers or those who are performing at a lower level of expectations, they too have the handle with reference to punitive measures, more so in the government system or the civil service system. On the other hand, in the private sector, there are people who don't perform as well as they should, and as a result, you would see how they would fall through the cracks, or they don't get to the level where they're supposed to get to, because of the society we live in. And you're not going to get it changed easily. You're not going to get it changed, unfortunately. I shouldn't say it that way, because the way I think, you shouldn't expect people to operate at a lower level, but they do. And as a result, you will not get the performance that is required. It frustrates me to see so many business opportunities here in Nevis and St. Kitts, and to see our people not taking advantage of them.
Let me include this caller. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Webbo. Good evening to your panel.
Good evening.
Quite an interesting conversation I'm listening to. And I keep hearing about expectations and levels. One of the things I have a question about, though, is we have expectations and we want to see people on levels. How much training are we doing to facilitate this? One of the things I recall when I first moved back to Nevis back in the early 90s, I had many conversations with the Honorable Malcolm Gishad then surrounding tourism and hospitality. And I was urging him as much as possible to teach hospitality in the schools. We are a service-oriented country or culture. We can't expect that people are going to wake up tomorrow morning and understand and fall in line with this thing needs to get done. It needs to get done now. It needs to get done on a timely basis. It needs to get done with a smile. It needs to get to serve. And I'm not talking about just the tourists, because the unfortunate thing is that a lot of our people, a lot of us, think that we should smile and offer a certain service to the tourists, but we don't offer it to each other. That was the reason why I've always felt it should be a process that starts right back to primary school. Teach the children hospitality. In that way, it would help them understand service. And I don't mean service in a demeaning manner. I'm talking about serving the public. How many times you go into a business place, people don't move. People don't get up and say, "Good morning, how can I help you?" It's like you have to go over and tap on the counter to get help. You're sitting there. The other day, I wanted to scream at a certain person in the establishment and say, "Hey, I didn't come here to hang out. I need some help. So why do you keep looking at me and not offering, not how can I help you, what is happening?" And I feel like I'm here to get something done. It may involve spending some money, which I hope we'll spend in your establishment. But I feel like I have to beg for it.
You know, caller,
Yes.
you know, I think it was very timely that you introduced what I recognize might have been a light moment. So when you asked them, when you said to them, why are they looking at you, what did they say?
I got a cut.
Go ahead, go ahead.
But
go ahead. Yes.
But Webbo, understand, huh? We are here. We are an organization. The way I was raised in Nevis, good morning to everyone. How can I help you? How can even if it's just a question on how to cross the street, you look like you're walking up the street and look like you're not sure where you're going. So, you okay? How can I help you? Are you looking for someone? Whatever. It starts a conversation. You never know where that conversation might go.
Caller, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You spoke about expectation. And the question is, you think our expectation most of the times, in most instances, is too great?
If the expectation is what?
It's too great.
If it's too great?
Yeah, great.
Oh, great?
Yes, meaning that we're expecting more than can be given.
You know what, Webbo? If I dare say, I never think that expectations are too great. I think it's all a matter of what we feel we're deserving of and that means working on you first and foremost, working on you as a person. And that comes from, I often speak of foundations, huh? That comes from foundations. When you walk into an establishment and you want me to hire you, when I sit across the desk from you, I'm going to ask you certain questions, and I'm going to look at how you answer and what you're saying, not just rambling off a bunch of...
Right, but from a realistic standpoint, is it possible that we are expecting more from Webo than Webo can give?
That, in some cases, that might be possible. But again, let me go back to, we sell hospitality in this culture. We sell hospitality in this culture. And so we should train, expectations should be down the road after that, because we would have prepared our people. It's not, if some people it becomes automatic. Some people it's not automatic. You got to work with them on it. And then a lot of things are possible after that. So the expectations could be coming from, we're expecting something that we haven't given our people.
So generally speaking, you're in agreement that we got quite a way to go?
We have.
Okay.
And we have a lot of training and a lot of communication. The other thing, while Mr. Brand is on the line, I don't know that this falls under him, but let me just make this comment. One of the most frustrating things for me personally, calling offices and you're getting no answer. And then if you push hard enough, you'll find out, well, that poor phone hasn't been working for a while. I've actually gotten that. So who is reporting this? What is happening? The communication, and is everybody gone from the office at the same time? This is in the middle of the day now, 10 o'clock in the morning. So these are some of the little things that we need to be looking at and following up to make sure that those little holes are being filled. But working with our people to prepare them for what the world of work or the environment they're going into is expecting from them, that's really, really important, and I think that's a big missing link.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
All right, thanks much. Okay, let me get a quick break and come back. This is Thought That Get Results with Edric W. Stanley, the Honorable Spencer Brand, and Dr. Patricia Bartlett. Back after these.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts, or call them at 466-4938.
Christmas radio, Christmas radio. It's a radio Christmas.
This is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, Vaughan Radio.
Back with our remaining minutes on Thought That Get Results with Edric W. Stanley, Dr. Patricia Bartlett, the Honorable Spencer Brand. What else we got?
Well, I just need to make a short comment. And the word hospitality.
Why don't
came
we
off.
stay on it for the rest of the time?
I know
No, work with me. Let's do that. Because
it is critically important.
right, so go ahead.
Because the word hospitality comes from hospitable. And anything that is inhospitable becomes terrible. But hospitable, it comes from within. And once you're hospitable, every good attitude will flow from that. I could tell anybody that. I was in the hospitality industry, and from day one, the very first night I worked, compliments went to the desk about me. Simply because we were taught to have manners, say good morning, say good afternoon, treat people hospitably, and therefore the name or word hospitality comes from that. There are a lot of people who work for the hotels here, and if they last for a long time, it means that they've been doing a great job. If they don't last, it simply means that they were inhospitable. I leave it there.
Well, but just let me respond to what Stanley, make a point. I think the issue within the civil service has a lot to do with the expectation, the level of expectation. People seem not to be expecting much from who in position, probably not expecting much from who are below them. I say that because I think, Webo, on a previous show, you would have made a point that there was a lady who, or maybe it wasn't you, maybe it was the Premier himself, someone who had two jobs, one in the civil service and one at Four Seasons. And the attitude on the job when they got to Four Seasons was very different. You would think it was a different person because of how they interacted with people when they're in that environment. Put them in an environment where there's no accountability and the expectations just not being met. Because we have a reference point. We have a point that we used to be able to look at the civil service, and people used to emulate it. People used to want to be in the civil service, And then we infuse all these, other, variables. Let me just, put it that way. And we have what we have today, but we have to take responsibility for the point at which we are now, or else we would never fix it. And I think that is what I would like to see, that whoever is responsible, and I'm not pointing any fingers as to who is supposed to be responsible, take responsibility. You have to do an audit and see where the shortcomings are, or else they would never get fixed.
But what if, Dr. Bartlett, though, the persons who are responsible, who are they reporting to, what if they're satisfied?
But that's why I said the expectation, and we have reference points. If you have somebody who doesn't care, well, obviously, anything plays, anything goes. You can't just put a man in a position because he might have voted for you, You have to put a man in position because he's competent to do the job, and he cares about the service. He came up through the system, and you'll be able to recognize who they are. But the thing is, the system is not operating the way it ought to, and so you have all these misfits. And so we're getting what we're getting now. The chickens have come home to roost.
There's a barometer, and one of the barometers is that politician expects that mother to vote for me, and therefore that is a yardstick by which a measurement is given.
Right, correct.
And on the other hand, the person who in fact feels that I don't have to be at my highest level of performance simply because I pay.
Right,
I pay with my
but
vote.
what I'm asking
Not
us
to
to
say
do,
it's correct.
I'm asking us to go beyond that and have some pride in what you do.
We must.
And that's what I'm saying, right? Have some pride in what we do. And I'll tell you something, that understand this. Our people will do much better if they know the consequences. In other words, I get compliments all the time about our staff with great service, because they know that I wouldn't accept anything else, right? And I can say that without being fear of contradiction. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Well, can I say this quickly?
Yes, go ahead.
I was brought up to answer the phone in my home by saying, where we lived, how can I help you? That's how I was taught at home. This is not just even also about the government training or whoever, or the hotel training, but even the parents in the home. Mr. Stanley spoke to hospitality. It's all about you. Sit across the table from someone and conduct an interview and understand that person, you will quickly see that person knows nothing about selling themselves by the way they answer. by
But
the way
then,
they
caller,
speak themselves.
the point I was trying to make earlier is this, that I won't even have a problem with that if we all agree that that is the standard. So then I won't be expecting anything else different. You got me?
Well, good luck with if they all agree, yeah? Because we have a long way to go to get to that point.
No.
But I'm just saying, it's you. It comes from within, as Mr. Stanley said, with you, how you purport yourself, how you deliver yourself. You're selling. A lot of people don't understand when they walk into an interview, they're selling themselves to get that job. And it's the way they deliver, the way they answer the question. And it's all about you and how you purport yourself, your hospitality. It's coming from within. So parents, if any parents are listening, we have our parts to play as well.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Good evening. Thank you.
Whoever the caller talked about how you sell yourself in an interview, and that is one of the steps that get pushed aside, even since we're talking about the civil service. People no longer have to do those things. You don't show up for an interview. You just the minister sends you, and you fit in where he sends you. They make space for you. That's the way it's done nowadays.
Right, but to be fair,
Webo,
to be fair is not just the minister alone, because I happen to know sometimes, of course they've got their share and they must act when they find out, but a lot of the times these ministers don't know a clue about some of the things that these people are doing. Now, as I said, when you do find out or it gets to you, you must act. But a lot of the time it is by their own doing. A lot of people do a lot of things basically on their own. Now, a game is played. So Stanley works with Mr. Brand. And what he does, he keeps close to Mr. Brand and tell him what he wants to hear. And Mr. Brand buys that. And then he terrorizes everybody else. That's not true, Stanley?
We understand the game.
So then it's true then.
It's true.
Okay. We just changed the needle to protect the record.
Webo,
Yes. Mr. Brand, yes.
I believe that there is still a structure in the civil service. I know that I can probably, let me speak for myself and what I have to go through to get people employed. We often have to write to oftentimes based on the position and so on, the Public Service Commission, and the Public Service Commission, the Public Service Commission do what they need to do, and either they approve or they disapprove. It is not always and often the time that most of the time we make certain requests, and we have had incident where certain employment were rejected. So I don't necessarily want it to be said in its entirety that because someone may vote for a political party or support a political party that they are automatically allowed to come into the civil service. There is a process. That process is very much entrenched. That process is very much intact. And I believe that while we may have certain desires as politicians, we don't necessarily always often get what we want. I think that at times we are told no, so I don't want it to be said, and I don't want it that the general public is of the opinion that everything that politicians want in terms of as it regards to employment, for example, that we often get. There is a process, there is a a structure in place. You know, we have to go through the Public Service Commission based on certain position and based on certain requirements. Oftentimes the Public Service Commission would approve, and there have been times when they don't. So the public service, Webber, and the civil service is, in my mind, and it have been proven in this pandemic as of late, where quite a number of persons have been showing some significant interest in the civil service. I think that there are some persons who, for one reason or the other, who have been in the service sector and have been around the service sector, the hospitality sector for some time, are now gravitating to the civil service. My hope is that once they, or if they are accepted in the civil service, that they would bring that level of professionalism to the service and try to elevate the space around them, the individuals around them as well. Because I feel, Webber, that there is always transfer of experience from both sides. There are times when we don't necessarily want to have new wine into old bottle. You basically want to make sure that you can see the progress and so on and so forth. But it's a dynamic service. It is not perfect. Of course, we certainly would want to see some improvement in some areas, but I feel that it is still an entrenched structure that is in place, and it ought not to be said or given the impression that structure has been completely eroded.
See, my own finding is there ain't a lot of difference between the public service and the private sector. So I just want to put that on the record, because I know in some departments in the public service that I use, you get great service. I could mention certain areas, and it is, you know, the individuals there, they do a very good job. Now, so I just wanted to put that in terms of my finding. I don't find that there's any great difference between the service you get from the private sector as opposed from the public sector, by and large.
Well,
right?
that's not my experience, though.
Well, I was just giving mine.
Yes,
that is why I said my findings
right,
are.
that's what I said.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so people are just people in some instances. You find a few, there are some areas, right? Because I do business in the public, in the private sector all the time. They bluff you the same. They tell you they'll call you back, they never do, etc., etc., etc. So what I'm encouraging everybody to do, including myself, including our staff and everything, is see how best we can serve and improve. We're not here basically bashing anybody in particular. We are trying to say, let's see if we can up our game.
As a people.
As a people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the appeal is good, Bebo. I appreciate the appeal that you're making, but the problem I have with it is that I don't find that appeals like this would be very effective. People get away with things that they get away with because they're allowed to get away with them. Mr. Brand spoke to the structure that is in place. Obviously, there's a long-standing structure in place. It has been compromised, and if we don't at least come to the admission that we have compromises, then we wouldn't be able to fix them. And that is what my appeal has been all night. Let us look, let us do an audit, let us see where we have the deficiencies, because we can't fix deficiencies if we don't identify them. And to sit here, and I'm not bashing the system, I'm just, maybe I'm a little bit too forthright about what I say about certain things, but I find that things are not going to get fixed in a hurry if we have that mentality. If people just sit back and say, well, everything is all right, because everything is not all right, or else we would not be having these complaints time and time again. Fix the system. The system needs fixing.
Well, as human beings, I hope that we would look at certain standards and elevate ourselves to those standards and operate at that level, because I am fully convinced that I could go out into the high schools, even the primary schools, even the kindergarten, and begin to identify a leader from those levels. You can see it. And ultimately, when they reach at a certain age, the performance still remains because they like to win. They like to be in the plus column, and therefore they settle for nothing less. They are athletes, they in the academics, and they always try to do and operate at the highest levels. You can't stop people like those.
Yeah, but those are the exceptional ones. And not everybody's exceptional. You know, we have a lot of people who are in the middle, and those are the ones who ultimately going to end up having to carry the system. The extreme ones, you know, that's what you're making reference to. We have to, and I agree, we have to go back to the formative years. We have to have more of an influence there. We have to look at this, you know, and see how best we can get these kids. And you know, I don't like to use that word, you know, but we're not going to brainwash them. I don't like to use that word, but we'll have to inculcate in these young people, you know, the value of service and serving not for yourself, you know, or to be served, or not presenting yourself, you know, to be served, but really to serve. And I remember talking to a group not too long ago about the service that we started, like when we were in primary school, there was this service organization like this, the brownies, and then we went on to high school, you did the girl guides, and you know, people started, that is where you get your foundation from, you know. And if you come through primary school not serving, you just throw your litter on the ground, you have no civic responsibility, then of course one would expect that you go through life just that way. And that is unfortunately what we are seeing nowadays, you know. We are not seeing kids that are well-rounded, kids that have a civic, you know, who are very civic-minded, who think about this society and how they can make it a better place, you know. And if you don't start early, then what we're getting now, the kind of service that we're getting now, really is based on what we would have sown, you know, because I can assure you, and that the service that we are complaining about today is not service that is being delivered by people who are in their 50s and their 60s. Chances are the kind of service that we're getting today that we complain about would be people who are much younger, people who are in their 30s and their 20s.
Well, we'll pivot north, whoever. I am delighted to recognize that the Attorney General for Donald Trump has broken ranks, and I'm hoping that this would filter down, because I was listening to a particular state, I think it's, no, let me not, for trying not to make a mistake, but based on his continued agitation, thinking that he's in the winning column. And I don't understand how this man could be thinking that he has won this election. And somebody came and made a comparison with the votes that President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris got. It's so much more than what Obama got. And they're saying because of those numbers, they don't believe they got that many votes. And I'm saying that based on the current situation with regard to COVID-19, that was a massive issue. That was a poignant issue that drove so many people, black and white, brown as the case might be, to have voted against Donald Trump. And he's the only one who lost. Why? Because he was a misfit, a square peg in a round hole. And as a result, he has to be thrown in the trash heap of history. And he doesn't want to go. He must go. I leave it there for the other commentators to bring their 2 cents in, or $10,000 bill in. I'll be honest. America is beginning now to find its way. It has lost its way. But based on the results of this election, I am hoping that the United States will be back on the front page, as leading the world, because Donald Trump took us down a dark hole, not understanding his responsibility, not understanding the enormous authority that was placed into his hands as the leader of the free world, and as a result, he blew it. So what he's attempting to do now is to tell people, I want to be a two-term president, when he was not even supposed to have been in the first place. When Obama got in, Mitch McConnell stated he would ensure that President Obama would be only a one-term president. And it's always good to defy people, to prove them wrong. As a result, Obama became a two-term president. Donald Trump, who always vilified President Obama, attempted to say, he doesn't belong there. I am now here, and I'm going to prove to you that I deserve 2 terms, come hell or high water. Well, I know that he's not going to be given 2 terms. Based on the dynamics currently, Donald Trump is history. Everybody got completely silent.
Yeah, maybe Mr. Brand might have some interest in the matter.
Well, I do have some interest in the matter.
We all have an interest in the matter. So many people
One of the interests that I have in the matter, Webo, has to do with the environment. I am happy to see the choice of John Kerry as the person who would be giving some attention to the environment. I believe that the United States under President Obama would have set the world and the globe, so to speak, on a particular path to try and protect the environment. And I believe that...
Brian, let me just take this. I'll get back to you. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening. I just listened to your conversation just now. And, you know, I remember being in a queue recently, and someone broke the line and pushed his way up front. And naturally, we said, wait your turn. And his response was, wait your turn? You better take your turn. The point is, we have become so aggressively individualistic. And, you know, that's how we are now. And I wonder whether our approach of being civil and in our delivery of excellence and striving for excellence is really the way to go, if it will actually bring results. Shouldn't we approach it more from the point of view of, well, it will benefit you in the long run if you are more customer-oriented? Okay? If, for instance, since we're so materialistic now, we can associate good service, good customer service, with things like tips and your reward. Obviously, it may work that way. I mean, of course, there are some cultures that don't allow tipping, the Japanese, for instance. Okay? But in our situation, isn't that more of the way to go? Because this appeal to tradition or traditional good manners and good customer service doesn't seem to be working. And I was it was ironic the other day when the Minister of Education down here in St. Kitts, John L. Powell, delivered an address to the CFBC graduating class, and basically the keynote address, basically the theme was striving for excellence. And you know, like I said, it was ironic. I'd leave it there.
Well, I would just make one short comment that reward sweetens labor. And in that regard, if you're in the hospitality business and you actually went beyond the call of duty, or it is just within you to deliver good service, and you get a tip, it gives you that impetus to do better and to work toward giving good service. And again, I just mentioned that reward sweetens labor. And if you're going to be rewarded for good service, it means that you must always try to give service at its optimum level.
Let me take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yeah, good evening, Rebel and company.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes.
Yeah, I go back to where Mr. Stanley was earlier when he said you have to be hospitably inclined, but inclined is my word. So therefore, if you are not hospitably inclined, you should not be there to get tips to make you be hospitality. I mean, good customer service. You're supposed to go in there with that built-in inside of you, and then you exhibit that. Then you will get more than tips. You will get taps and build-up. But don't go in there, a lazy person have no interest in working, no ambition, and you only go in there for the money. And because two person give you a good tip, then you're going to continue and say, well, okay, I'm not going to answer people, and shake head. So if you're not hospitably inclined, keep out. That is the wrong place for you. You all have a good night. Thanks
Before you go, Carlo, how do you get hospitably inclined?
Well, like Mr. Stanley said, it has to be in you from training.
By who?
From a youth.
Yes, by who?
By parents.
Okay.
And then the school will take up the rest. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
I mean, just to follow up on this caller, while living in another jurisdiction and was in the hospitality industry, I was asked to visit a particular gentleman in the United States, and I was on bond, meaning like a work permit. From the time you approach the counter at the airport, and you're not going to the Eastern or Western Caribbean, immigration is right there. And they're going to, in fact, you're going to be impounded. But this gentleman told me, when you get your vacation, come and visit me. So I said, it's not really possible. But when I got vacation, I decided I'm going to call him, and I called him, and he told me, just go to the immigration department and tell them that you're coming to visit me. So I told Mr. Fossil, it doesn't work that way. He said, just go to the immigration department and tell them you're coming to visit me. I didn't know who the man was, and he never tipped me. Went to the immigration department. They said, go to the airport, buy your ticket, and go. I was astounded, just like Daniel in the lion's den. Upon arriving in New Jersey...
You're not going to tell me the Daniel in the lion's den story was about you.
I'm just giving an example, as immigration was so hostile to people from the Eastern and Western Caribbean that when you go there to tell them you're going to the United States, they want to know if you're crazy. And you would be held. Anyway, when I got and visited Mr. Fossil, one morning at breakfast, he leaned over and he said he was an advisor to John F. Kennedy. I never knew, he never told me that before, but just to tell you, if you have it within you, so many things, so many pluses can occur. And I wound up in New Jersey, 19 days in New Jersey, as a bonded worker. So you're not only going there to get tips, but you operate at a level where you are on call, you give service, and you operate to the best of your ability, and nothing will stop you. I eventually wound up being offered the assistant general manager at that same hotel. But it was too little too late. I had already moved on. But I'm just saying, it has to be within you. And once it is within you, it will come out and you will deliver.
Yep, and once you're in a merit-based system, that recognize the service, and your value, then you should be, rewarded accordingly. The problem is that around here, everyone gets a paycheck regardless of what your performance level is. It's not affected by your performance. You just show up and you get paid. Some people don't even show up as they're required to and still get paid. And that is what the problem is within the system.
We have to look for those who got leadership in their blood, got that kind of attitude, and ultimately to exemplify that kind of attitude. And for them to, in fact, be in a position for that attitude to rub off on other people. But we are good people, and we can learn, and we can be trained, and ultimately to deliver the service at that optimum level where compensation would be just a small token. But you feel good about it simply because of your performance and ultimately where you wind up in life. Because if you are
President-elect Biden would have selected John Kerry as his person to deal with matters of the environment, I believe that those of us who are in these small island development states would recognize that the former president thought that global warming was a hoax and didn't really pay too much attention to it, actually.
The present.
Well, the present, yeah, thanks for the correction. Removing the US from the Paris Accord and all of that, I think in my mind was a kind of dangerous thing to do. But I am hopeful, Webo, that the strides that the United States would have made as it regards to trying to combat global warming with the rest of the world, really. There are still a few nations who have not signed on to it. I am hopeful that we would see that thrust towards reduction in greenhouse gases and pollution of the environment and so on will be given some prominence, because those of us who are here in these small island development states are the ones who often feel the greatest impact. We have had a hurricane season this year, so bad that we have had to use the Greek language, the Greek names. I think that those are just indication that this is an issue that I believe these superpowers, so to speak, have to take seriously. And I'm just hopeful that this new president and this John Kerry, who is now responsible again for the environment in the United States, can bring about some meaningful change, Webo, because the thinking is that of the present president, I want to make sure I get it right this time, the present president, that global warming, just like many other things, you feel that they were all hoax and so on and so forth, but the effects of them have really affected many lives. We have seen the kind of strength of a lot of these most recent hurricane, and the science is saying that this global warming phenomenon is one that is driving them. So I'm hopeful that we can see some real tangible progress make in the reduction of these greenhouse gases that is causing so much destruction as it regards to these small islands. And we in these small island states where we don't necessarily have the necessary resources to put in place the necessary mitigative measures. So all of these are things that we are hoping that these larger countries, who are the greatest polluters, who are the greatest contaminators, would bring to the table to realize that this is a real problem. So I'm happy that they have looked at the environment as a serious concern and putting the necessary persons in place to try and deal with it.
Well, to be honest, I believe President-elect Biden has chosen a good number of experienced people, and not only to bolster his administration, but also to send the message to the world that the United States is still a global leader, but had this misfit, as you can call him, lame duck president, if you don't want to if you can't find the right term. And therefore, the team that he's putting together are people who are well seasoned, and they're people who are well known, not only within the United States but globally. So, based on what this lame duck president has done, nobody could tell me, nobody could convince me that he didn't have ulterior motives with reference to dictatorial policies and ultimately as a ruler. But he has been caught, and the people went out in droves and voted and actually fired him. So where we are, the United States is beginning to get back on the right path and finding its footing to again be the leader of the free world.
But as they put America first, though, I don't think it is any coincidence
Good
that
slogan, with a good slogan.
but I don't think it's any coincidence, though, that for the economic recovery in the United States, that President-elect has decided that it's an all-woman cabinet, that he wants to work on this issue. It's just pure women, on that council, the Economic Council, who are going to lead the charge, for the economic recovery of the United States. What do you think about that?
But Janet Yellen has been the chairperson of the Federal Reserve, and she has been in many top financial positions, and as a result, she's well respected. And the Treasury Secretaries, of course, we have had quite a number of them, but based on their history, because you don't really pick somebody from the middle of nowhere to put into these top positions.
No, I just wanted to underscore the point, though, that all
women.
of them are women,
right?
And I'm asking you what is your reaction to that?
My reaction to that, not a reaction, my statement to that is that I gave them a plus, because these are not people who have not demonstrated high level of functionality and demonstrated that they can produce and will produce. Not like some women who want to just get a position, to be appointed to a position because the position is there. No, these are people who have proven their salt.
No, we're in this world, you find women just get a position because they're women.
But
that hardly ever happens.
You qualified it by saying hardly.
That hardly ever happens. You know that.
That is good enough for me.
If a woman isn't
that's good enough for me. I'm just saying to you, the women that have been appointed, because even the Vice President-elect, upon hearing her on the stage among those men, she got, I don't want to describe it anyway, but she did well among those men, and she was tested. And she was one of my picks, because again, if you were involved, if you follow it closely, I mean, when Reagan sent around, when the Republican Party sent around the questionnaire as to who should be picked as a possible vice president, I chose George Bush. And I'm saying to you, with Biden choosing Kamala Harris, being a prosecutor, being the AG for California, she wasn't somebody that just came from nowhere and didn't have ace performance in terms of demonstrating that she can do the job. And therefore, it had nothing to do with women, but based on the fact that they can perform, they have performed, and will perform. So you can't come up with apples and oranges. We are looking for people who are capable and not being looked at simply because, I want a position, therefore I should be appointed, or what as the case might be. All those, they got a history of performance and delivery. That's why they are chosen. And again, President-elect Biden has to prove his worth to the people of the United States and indeed, by extension, the rest of the world. So those weren't just women that he chose and appointed. Those are women, like I said, based on the barometer of people who have performed and will perform and will bring the United States back to its former glory. The market has rebounded, and people kept saying, "Oh, the market is moving because of Donald Trump." It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Like I've said in the past, the big people with the money, when they see something that might be a negative, they pull their money out. Just like a stove. If you decide to turn the stove lower, the water would lose its heat. Based on the fact that they would put back in their money, the market would take off. Has nothing to do with Donald Trump. So, based on what's happening, the United States again is back in business.
Could I, Mr. Herbert, through you, sir, can I ask Mr. Brand the same question? How does he feel, and what are his thoughts as it relates to an all-women team leading the economic recovery of the great United States?
Dr. Bartlett, I would also like to know how you feel, but I would, I believe that if an individual, whether it's a man or woman, is competent and qualified to do a job, that they should be given the opportunity to do the job.
Oh, well, that was quite brief. Well, obviously, and I think this underscored the point that I've been trying to make with Mr. Herbert. For years now, I've been trying to suggest that women ought to be given the opportunity. Women have the capacity to serve at the highest level. And it's been a while in coming, and we've finally seen it being borne out in the United States. We've seen it around the world. I think even during this pandemic, women leaders have demonstrated by virtue of the fact that their countries, that most of these women, leading, would have done much better compared to countries of similar GDP, on the same level as it relates to their performance in terms of controlling the COVID and their response to it. And I'm pleased, and I can't contain myself how pleased I am that that Biden has finally seen the worth in women to promote them to that level. We haven't seen it to that level, I think, before now, and I'm glad that the United States is finally coming around to accepting women on the same level that and women now seem not to have to work as hard as or harder than men in terms of getting the recognition that they deserve. I think it is way over, it's high time that something like that happens. And I can't contain myself. And I think that of all the good news that we've heard so far, that I think is the most promising, for me. And I'm hoping that would in itself be. Well, I think we have seen it around here starting, because I see the NRP have really moved in terms of moving to embrace women, in a big way, in terms of leading the party, and they're quoting other women, I think, to join in leadership position. So I'm glad to see that is resonating now in the area, and I'm hoping that becomes a fad, because women are capable and women can do it. If we look at the universities, you have women outnumber the men, actually, as it relates to tertiary education, and so it is just fitting, I think, and a natural progression, if you will, that women move to these higher positions. And I'm hoping that Mr. Brand and his party would start to embrace women the same way, and that at some point in time we would have a level playing field as it relates to the representation of women at least in our local politics.
Dr. Bartlett, my party have embraced women, and my party at the moment is embracing women. So
I didn't mean I didn't mean hugged up, you know.
No.
I mean, meant to elevate them.
No. The Concerned Citizen Movement Party have embraced women. Concerned Citizen Movement Party was the first party on Nevis who have had an elected member in Parliament who was a woman. And the Concerned Citizen Movement Party at the moment does have a member in the cabinet, in Parliament, who is a woman. So I don't want you
Brand,
to give
let me
the
interrupt
impression.
you. I'll come back to you. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, I'm not as well. I'm hoping your panelists are right, but I don't think I share the optimism that the new president will reverse the policies of Trump. So I think Trump succeeded in fundamentally changing the dynamics of the relationship between the U.S. and the rest of the world. Okay, in a way that nobody thought he would be able to. I mean, look how easily he walked out of what we thought were ironclad agreements, like the Paris Accord and NAFTA, the Iranian deal, the Israeli-Arab relationship that's changed. And one would argue that that was all to the benefit of America. You just didn't see it coming down the road. Okay, so I don't think that Biden can just reverse all of that, right? And Americans themselves might not like the fact that he would even try. Because when it comes to the environmental issue, for instance, the world cannot support the kind of standard of living consumerism of the U.S., right? If the whole world were to go that route, we'd run out of resources pretty fast. So those kinds of agreements, I am sure, are done not so much with our interests in mind, but with the U.S. interest. They're going to want to preserve their dominance. And so even though they might have disliked what Trump was doing, they see the benefits to them, okay? And we should definitely guard against this euphoria, the same kind of euphoria we had when Obama was elected. I think some people thought he'd do more for the blacks and more for his race generally. And so they were very disappointed that he, didn't manage to do more. And this can be the same thing now. We might have too high an expectation of Biden. So I think it's way too early to say that America is back on track. We have to wait and see exactly what he does. With regards to women, of course it's a good thing. But in the final analysis, again, results are what's going to count. Okay, and yes, there's a unique opportunity for women to show their mettle in what has previously been a male-dominated area, but we have to wait for the results. Okay? All right. Then.
Okay, thank you. Brand?
One of the fundamental...
Babu, I was responding to Dr. Bartlett that the Concerned Citizen Movement has in fact embraced women. We have done so in the past, and we presently have a woman member in the cabinet in Parliament. So it's not that the Concerned Citizen Movement have not embraced women in the past. So I don't want Dr. Bartlett to try and give the impression that the Concerned Citizen Movement have not done so. And I would hope that we should put the record straight and we should give accurate information, because the Concerned Citizen Movement have certainly embraced women. If Dr. Bartlett is prepared to say, well, she would like to see more women involved in the Concerned Citizen Movement, then that's a different argument. Then we can have the conversation.
Well, that is what the conversation is. If you have one woman, if you have one token woman,
you have said that the CCM have not embraced women, and I think that is inaccurate.
Well, I mean, we all live here, and I think most of the people who are listening in the audience and they've been able to observe, to have one token woman is not enough. What we have said is, and as it relates to the equality, we must have gender equality. You must have equal numbers, as close to as possible that you can have that. To have one token woman 10 years ago or 20 years ago and still have one token woman mean that you're not opening up to embracing the full participation of women in your party?
Dr. Bartlett.
And that is what my question has been.
Dr. Bartlett, you preface your statement by saying that my party have not embraced women. And
No,
I
you-
am saying to you.
Not
and
to the
I am
extent
saying
I would have liked to see.
Well, no, that's a different argument. Then,
But I acknowledge that it's a
then I am
different
saying
argument.
to you that we have done so.
Yeah, and you have much more to go. You have to demonstrate that you don't just have a token woman. You can't when your party started, 1992 or thereabout, you can't in 1992 have one woman as a token and come in 2000, going on 2022, still only have one token woman. That is not embracing women. That is just having a token representation of women. Women represent at least close to 51% of the population. So why should you still just have one woman that represent just what percent of the parliament is that? 1 out of 5? That's less than 20%. Well, let's call it 20%. That's not enough. You're not progressing. You're still at the same. You're still stuck at your starting level of one woman as a token.
Well, we have to look at the women participation in not only local affairs but global affairs. We had Golda Meir of Israel. We had Mrs. Bandaranaike of Ceylon many years ago. We had Eugenia Charles from right within our Caribbean states, Dominica. And it tells you these are women who were exemplary, and they in fact deserved to have been where they've been, in the positions that they've held. So, again, you just can't feel that because of, there must be practical application of theory in terms of the education, being practical when they actually go to perform, and in their performance you could see that the education level is appropriate with reference to their governance level. So we know at this juncture that more women are at the universities and institutions of higher learning than men, but at the same time that academic application has to be brought forward in terms of the performance when it comes to governance.
Well,
Now, on the gentleman who talked about Trump and we're not going to reverse or shouldn't reverse. Okay, one of the salient things that Trump did was to brought the Arabs, Israel and a few of its neighbors, some recognition. But in terms of what Trump did with the Paris Accord, the environmental issue, he should never have withdrawn from it. Work with it, improve it, but he doesn't believe in global warming. He has said it, and in my view, that is talking ignorance based on the science. So every time he says something and we are able to prove that he is ignorant, then he must be categorized as such. And you can't tell me in terms of the gentleman who called in his argument that policies that he put in place that are not workable and good must not be replaced, and they will be replaced.
Destabilize the world, actually.
You understand? And most of the world leaders know that Trump is not as smart as he thought, and his sister, who was a judge, said what he did, and his niece wrote whom he is. So how you get all these negatives coming out in terms of truth, and you want to tell me that some of his policies must not be rolled back? They will be rolled back. Trump was not a leader. As Rubio stated, he was a con man. He got there and he was able to get this one term, and praise the Lord that he is going to be thrown in the trash heap of history. Would be repeating myself.
Well, since we're debating, or at least weighing in on this statement that was made by the caller.
Just let me take this first, Dr. Bartlett. I get back to you. Thank you for holding. Good evening.
Yeah, Weber,
Yes.
I just called to endorse everything Mr. Stanley has just said. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Bartlett.
So I think the caller would have made a point about Obama, not the euphoria that we experienced under Obama. It didn't necessarily bear fruit. I'm just paraphrasing what he would have said. But I just wanted to remind him that the thing is, in America, you have checks and balances, and you have something called the Senate. And I think that indeed was what Obama's Achilles heel was. He just could not get, I think, to do most of what he thought that he could have accomplished during his stay there, just because of the Senate that was there. Very, very hostile, environment, and it was deliberately done to frustrate, I think, his agenda. So not that I'm not necessarily picking up for him because he was black. I thought that he did not necessarily get a fair shake in terms of going through with the things that he, at least most of us, would have expected would have been done. Mind you, not everything that he would do would please us as a Caribbean, because the things that are done within the best interest of America, that sometimes like the deportation of people, sending back people here who probably don't have much of a base here, and without the support, social, support for those people, kind of wasn't so. I didn't think was so kind, and the consideration, I don't think due consideration was given to the impact that it would have on us as a black people, and and struggling economies that, at least as Mr. Brand would call us, the developing countries. So I did not necessarily agree with everything that Obama did, and I don't know if any of us would be pleased with everything that Biden would have done. But I think, though, that most of us kind of embrace some of the, and let me not stop using that word, most of us appreciate the fact that the agenda of the Democrats may be more aligned to what we have been socialized to accept as, looking after people, as it relates to making humanity a little more progressive. And at the end of the day, looking out for people, bearing in mind that we need safety nets, and we ought to operate in the global sphere as if we're each other's neighbor. And I think that is where I would have taken offense to the kind of attacks that the lame duck, as Stan would say, the lame duck would have, taken, as it relates to developing countries, and the way he would have looked down on us. I did not appreciate that, and I still can't understand why people would support him, but they have that right.
Well, they supported him simply because he propelled the argument that white is right, and the number of people, even seeing these people from Arizona trying now to organize some kind of legislative session, joint session of the legislature, two houses, to bring about some of the fraud that they believed that were perpetrated during the election. But they're not, that has a chance as a snowball in hell. Not going to work, simply because America, based on its large population and the number of people who went out and voted, that's just a small percentile number of those people in Arizona who feel, for some reason, that Trump must challenge the system. I do not understand how they can't get it. His term is over. Finito. And therefore, go into oblivion. Leave the stage. He doesn't want to leave the stage, but he would be forced to leave the stage coming the 20th of January. The people have spoken. He won by default in the first place. And I say default because there are times when you must have the wisdom to understand that something is not right. And the Electoral College, in fact, approved his election, approved his win, and gave him the key to the White House. But poor fellow didn't understand that he was given the biggest prize. But he didn't know what to do with it. And he blew it. Now he wants to still be on stage with the expectation of coming back in 2024. But we'll bring Obama back at him. Obama is younger than he is. We'll bring Obama back.
I don't think that's an option.
Sure it is.
Oh.
I don't think that's an option.
It is an option. Since you think that you can garner so many votes and you believe Biden would be, in fact, gone on to the great beyond, we know that Obama actually brought about the awakening of the black people and their votes, and as a result, Obama would be able to take him on.
No, but
in
your
2020.
constitution doesn't. Your constitution
No. It doesn't bar him from running again. It bars you from running beyond 2 terms, but it doesn't bar you from being a candidate 5 years later. No.
Well, then I don't understand what 2 terms mean. Then
The 2 terms meaning you can two consecutive terms.
it is specific to 2 consecutive terms. So why is it that we would not have had a Clinton, a third Clinton run?
Clinton
would have said his wife.
Clinton told them that there were 2 presidents. I gave you 2 in 1.
Well, then again, Clinton.
And he was expecting that his
But then again,
wife.
Clinton was impeached, so I don't know if maybe that would have.
Well, that is.
If maybe that would have affected his.
That might have affected him. I mean,
But I've never heard. I thought that the 2-term limits meant that you could only serve 2 terms as the United States president.
No, it means that you can
You
only
can take a
serve-
break and come back.
Yes, you can.
Well, I've never really read your
You can.
constitution. I must ask the
And
question.
therefore,
Was impeached too.
and therefore,
You know that?
Trump feels for some reason that he will be on stage again in 2024. But I'm saying to you,
But he would have only served 1 term, so he
well-
is eligible to serve.
well, I'm saying to
compete
you,
again.
he couldn't serve 2 terms because the people fired him.
Right, we
The voters
understand
fired
that.
him.
We understand that.
And therefore, he is attempting to come back, not because he didn't get his 2 terms, but there's a break, and once there's a break in terms of the timeline, you can come back. But age, of course, has been a factor, but no, Reagan was the oldest president that ran when he ran, and everybody thought he was too old to run. But he ran, he won, and then when you look at Trump and Hillary were up there. Now Biden is the oldest president, older than all of them. So the age is going up, and thus it doesn't become a factor, a real factor anymore. But of course I must say that it is.
But if you want to be realistic, though, I think maybe you should start quoting Cuomo from New York. I think he's quite a popular guy at this stage, and you can start grooming him to take on Trump in 2024.
Well, there are quite a number of.
Because it's not likely that Biden will run for 2024, you think?
No. Well, Biden again was there as. It's strange how the Lord works.
Never say never.
No, but you just said that age is not a factor, but do
No,
you
but
realistically
to be
expect
honest,
Biden to run for 2024?
It is believed that Biden would be sidelined because Kamala Harris, I mean the Vice President-elect, is being looked at a possible follower of Biden, of being the standard bearer for the Democratic Party in 2024. Because because of her age, she's still a young woman, and 2, she's got a certain degree of firepower. But there are quite a number of other people. And don't misunderstand me, the Republican Party does have some people with a tremendous amount of firepower. But Trump was a fluke.
This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On the Mark. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community, taught at Get Result. You all have a wonderful evening.